Hello everyone and welcome to this video that will be entirely dedicated to our Veilguard companion Neve Gallus. In this video we'll look into all previous appearances of Neve in the extended media, analyze her actions in the gameplay reveal video and indulge in some theorizing. So let's start with her name first. You know that Latin proverb nomen est omen? I was wondering if there's a meaning behind Neve's name, something that could give us a hint of who she is. So I looked up her name, and here's what I found. The name Neve is of Latin and Irish origin and means snow. There are other meanings like bright, radiant, live, beautiful, and so on, but snow is the meaning that popped up the most. Also, the word of similar spelling, Neve, means the partially compacted granular snow that forms the surface part of the upper end of a glacier. Neve also means snow in Italian and Portuguese, so that's a lot of snow references for our Ice Mage companion. But who is Neve? In short, Neve is a private investigator and a mage from Tevinter. We were introduced to her in the Tevinter Night story, The Streets of Minrathous, and she also made an appearance in the comic The Missing. Most importantly, she'll be a companion and a romance option in the upcoming Dragonage the Veilguard. She is described as a cynic fighting for a better future, and she's also affiliated with the Shadow Dragons, a rebellious anti-slavery group operating in Tevinter. In the Streets of Minrathous, Neve is hired to determine whether a man named Quentin Calla is a Venatori. Quentin was disowned by his parents and taken in by his uncle. He was indeed a Venatori once, but he has turned his life around, left the Venatori, and became a vocal supporter of Minrathous' anti-slavery movement, or so it would seem. Quentin's uncle began to suspect Quentin had gone back to the Venatori ways and hired Neve to uncover the truth. And that is where we find Neve at the beginning of the story, following Quentin through the dark streets of Minrathous to a secret meeting. Neve witnesses Quentin meeting with a mysterious figure wearing a bronze mask. The meeting isn't very long as the figure snatches a golden chain from Quentin's neck and then stabs him. Neve tries to pursue the attacker but stops to help Quentin instead. A dying Quentin tells her he is not a Venatori and that it is almost the hour, but he doesn't live long enough to provide more information. Neve then informs the Templars of what happened via message while she goes to Quentin's uncle. Quentin's uncle isn't interested in continuing the investigation, and it seems that will be the end of Neve's involvement in the affair, or that would have been the case if Knight Templar Rana Savas hadn't come to tell her another suspected Venatori had been murdered in the same way as Quentin. And so Neve joins forces with the Templars, who are different from the Southern Templars. These Templars don't use lyrium and hold much less power. Their main purpose is to investigate magic used outside of the law, but that is not always easy as they often have to investigate members of the ruling class. So anyway, Neve and Rana go to Lady Varanthus' place, where the lady herself had been murdered. It turns out Lady Varanthus has been killed in the same manner as Quentin, and the bruise around her neck suggests she was wearing the same chain as Quentin did, the chain that was forcibly removed by her murderer. Neve leaves the Templars to do their Templar work while she tries to gather information about Quentin through unofficial channels. She finds some bits and pieces, but nothing that would move the investigation forward. Then the information finds her. Neve is approached by a finely dressed man, who we later learn is named Flavian, who tells her Quentin and the others were killed by a woman called Elia, and each of the victims had a clay disc attached to a gold chain that Elia took. Flavian gives Neve his disc, which depicts a four-winged dragon rising from the dark sea etched on the front. Before Neve can question him some more, Flavian attacks her and flees. Neve then takes the necklace to a man who looks into conspicuous objects. He determines the necklace is fueled by blood magic, which is not news to Neve. But then he mentions Corypheus, freaks out and rushes Neve out of his shop. Almost right outside of the shop, Neve sees a figure in a bronze mask waiting for her. The two engage in a fight, and Neve suspects the person she's fighting is Aelia, and she is right. Aelia tells her the necklace in Neve's possession is a seal and manages to grab one half of it while the other half remains with Neve. Neve then tracks down the person who gave her the necklace in the first place, Flavian, and demands some answers. He confesses that a demon is sealed beneath Minrathous, and the necklaces are seals to its prison. He says Corypheus wanted to use the demon if Minrathous refused to submit to him willingly. That would have been the hour of Minrathous' return. When Neve remarks Minrathous had faced demons before, Flavian says, quote, "Not like this, it's something only a god could summon," end quote. Corypheus wanted to summon it after defeating the South, but that victory never came. So it seemed the plan was abandoned, but then Aelia took over the Venatori and set the plan in motion. While Neve is questioning Flavian, a tremor shakes the ground beneath them. The ritual had begun. Flavian tells Neve the ritual is taking place in the catacombs beneath the city and where to find the entrance. So Neve knows where to go, but she goes to the Templars first. Neve tells Rana what she found, but the Knight Templar is too duty-bound and set on following the chain of command to go with Neve without first informing her superiors. So Neve sets off alone to face Aelia and the rest of the Venatori and stop the demon summoning. She finds Aelia in the midst of performing the ritual, surrounded by at least 30 other Venatori. The seals are broken and Aelia is draining the blood from the dead man at her feet. She is focusing all her power into a large stone obelisk that rises to the full height of the catacombs. Below the obelisk, Neve sees a moving shadow. It is the demon Aelia wants to release, and Neve has to do something to disrupt the ritual. Doing so makes her presence known to Aelia and the Venatori, but luckily Rana and the rest of the Templars come to Neve's aid. The ritual is broken, the shadow is gone, and Aelia is taken into custody by the Templars. Once the ritual is prevented and the Venatori are taken care of, Neve goes to Quentin's uncle to tell him he wasn't wrong to take Quentin in and that his nephew wasn't a Venatori. And thus the story ends. So what did we learn about Neve from this story? She's a private investigator living in Minrathous, in a room she's renting from a third-rate bookseller. She's not from one of the old Tevinter families and notes, quote, "My family has more Templars than mages. I'm sure that says a lot about me," end quote. What that suggests is she's most likely a Laetan. She's not an Altus, and seeing how she's a mage, she's not one of the Soporati. She's not a slave either, though it is possible she was once a slave and was freed, which would make her one of the Liberati, but nothing in this story suggests that. So most likely she's a Laetan, which would be something like a middle class in Tevinter. She remarks on not working often with people in Gallus' circle, and when she comes to Lady Varanthus' home, she thinks how the Knight Captain looks as comfortable there as she feels, further emphasizing she's not a member of the upper class of the Winter Society. She mentions her family having more Templars than mages, so it's possible she comes from a family of Soporati that recently got promoted to Laetan status, either by Neve's magical ability or thanks to some other mage member of her family. As a Laetan, she's not living in luxury, but she's not poor either. She can afford bribes and has enough money to rent a room and buy fried fish suppers. That makes Neve the first ordinary companion we have from Tevinter. With Fenris and Dorian, we got insight into two extremes of Tevinter society. We got the former slave's perspective from Fenris and the future magister's perspective from Dorian. And now with Neve, we have the perspective of someone caught in the middle. She wants to change things, she wants a better Minrathous, but she doesn't have Illyria markings like Fenris or a seat in the magisterium like Dorian. The tools Neve has at her disposal are different and are a direct result of her place in the world. But I think that is what makes Neve so relatable. She's everyone who's ever looked at the world around them and strived to change it for the better, but with limited options. Of course, her role in changing the winter and saving the world will probably turn out to be much grander than that, but I love how this is the position she's in at the beginning of the story. Neve's cynical outlook is prominent in the Streets of Minrathous story. She knows how things work. She knows she was hired to look into Quentin because his uncle feared the scandal of a public arrest more than anything else. She knows the Templars are only allowed to do their job if they don't step on the toes of someone important. And she knows most of the Venatori taken in by the Templars from the ritual site will bribe their way to freedom, and only those with insufficient money and connections will be persecuted. She knows all that, but she's not apathetic to it. She sees the selfishness and corruption, but that doesn't make her resigned or indifferent. She's not one of those people who see no point in fighting because things are bad and people are evil and corrupt and that's how it's always been and always will be, and so on. Rather, she understands how the world works and acts accordingly. In other words, her outlook is not a sign of resignation, but of intelligence and maturity. In the Dragon Age livestream, Neve was described as a cynic with a heart of gold. And yeah, she's a good person, and her good-hearted nature really shines in the Streets of Minrathous story, but in a subtle way. We can see it in her second conversation with Flavian. The man is a former Venatori, he gave her the lead that almost got her killed, and Neve notices he is feeling no remorse over it. Still, in the end, she just lets him go. No payback for putting her in danger, no detaining him for the authorities, she just lets him go. More precisely, she gives him a chance to live his life and shake off his past. She didn't have to do it. And she didn't have to visit Quentin's uncle in the end. The matter was resolved as far as he was concerned. But she gave him closure regardless, whether she did it for him or for Quentin, doesn't matter. It's in those situations where she did something she didn't have to do that her kind side is shown. I didn't feel at any moment that the story was bashing me on the head with the "Neve is so good and amazing" message and forcing me to like her. The story treats that as just another layer of her character rather than her character's selling point and the reason why she should be liked, and I really appreciate that approach. And now we take a quick trip to Theory Town before continuing with the rest of Neve's story. There is one very popular theory about the demon Aelia tried to summon. According to this theory, the demon is the Formless One, the last remaining Forbidden One we have yet to encounter in a game. Each game so far has featured one of the Forbidden Ones. In Origins we had Gaxkang the Unbound, in Dragon Age 2 there was Zebenkek, and finally in Inquisition we met Imshale. According to Tarani's research, the first of the Winter Mages searched the Fade and discovered the Forbidden Ones. These Forbidden Ones, Gaxkang the Unbound, Zebenkek, Imshale, and the Formless One, taught them blood magic. This theory opposes the more popular one, popular in universe, not in the fandom, that humans learned blood magic from Dumat, but that is the information Tarani had. In her writings, Tarani claimed the oldest account of the Forbidden Ones she found dates back to 42 Black, but the Inquisitor can find a much older account in Vir Dirthara. The Codex entry found in Vir Dirthara speaks of the exile of the Forbidden Ones. It is said Zebenkek and the others of her ilk were banished by the Evanuris for abandoning the people in their time of greatest need, for casting aside form to flee to where the earth could not reach. So whatever the Forbidden Ones are, whatever they did, one thing is certain, they are ancient. When Neve is observing Aelia's ritual, she notes this about the thing the Venatori are trying to summon. Quote, If this was a demon at all, it was older and larger and more nameless than any demon I'd ever heard of, and so much worse besides." End quote. Later, she caught a glimpse of what that demon could do. Quote, "The shadow heaved as the Templars fought the Venatori. It was darker now, thicker too, but still formless. I saw a still-haired Venatori stumble near the writhing darkness. Before he could straighten back up, the shadow was wrapped around his wrists. The cultist jerked to his knees. His body convulsed. Silence fell suddenly on both sides, broken by the screams of the old man as he sunk from view." End quote. Keep in mind, the demon did this while still being mostly imprisoned, as Neve and the Templars prevented the ritual from completing. Neve uses the word formless to describe the shadow, and that could indicate the demon is, indeed, the formless one, the last of the forbidden ones. Combined with the fact we have had a forbidden one appear in every game thus far, this theory is plausible. Maybe we will have a quest revolving around this demon. Perhaps some Venatori will try to follow Elia's footsteps, and it will be up to Rook and the team to stop them. But Neve stopping Elia's ritual wasn't the only run-in she had with the Venatori. In the streets of Minrathous, she mentions, quote, "I'd run into the Venatori before, but never seen anything like this," end quote. We also saw her causing trouble for them again in the comic The Missing. In the comic, Varric and Harding come to Minrathous in search of solace. Harding is frustrated by the fact they wasted too much time and the trail has gone cold, but Varric offers a solution to that. He tells Harding about Neve and points out that if anyone could tell them whether solace had been in Minrathous, it would be her. So Varric and Harding meet with Neve, and she indeed has information for them. She tells them Solus had been causing trouble for the Venatori. He attacked their sites, stole artifacts, and freed a group of elven slaves from them. Neve then takes Varric and Harding to meet some of the freed slaves. She also reveals she's been working with a group trying to help the slaves, the group called the Shadow Dragons. Neve takes Varric and Harding to a place where former slaves gather for food, and upon talking to one of them, the group learns the freed slaves will hold a meeting, and the Venatori are planning to attack them during it. Neve urges Varric and Harding to help the slaves, and they agree to do it even if helping the slaves means letting Solus get away. Neve shows up at the meeting point with the group of people, presumably Shadow Dragons, and helps Varric and Harding in their fight against the Venatori. After the Venatori are defeated and the slaves are safe, Neve says the Shadow Dragons and she will help them get to somewhere the Venatori won't be able to find them. After everything that happened in the streets of Minrathous story and in the comic The Missing, it's no wonder we see Neve being the Venatori target in the gameplay video. In the gameplay reveal video, we learned that Varric and Rook were supposed to meet with Neve at a bar, but the Venatori had taken her before Varric and Rook got there. So now they joined with Harding and look for Neve, while at the same time Solus's ritual has begun. The reason they were supposed to meet with Neve is that she has information about Solus, and with everything that is going on, Rook, Harding and Varric don't have much time. When they find Neve, she has already dealt with the Venatori and is waiting for them in some kind of icy dome. Neve tells them she had not seen Solus in person, but had found hints of old magic, the kind that can be found in elven ruins. With Neve's help, the team tracks Solus to the ritual site in the Arlathan forest, and it's time for the confrontation. Varric decides to try to talk to Solus and convince him to stop the ritual, which Harding objects to. When Rook supports Harding's point of view, Neve disapproves. This is interesting, and there are several reasons why Neve would disapprove in this situation. She obviously agrees with Varric, but why? It could be that she supports a diplomatic approach in general, even when it comes to stopping world-ending events. Furthermore, she doesn't know Solus, she wasn't a member of the Inquisition and has no reason to feel personally betrayed or deceived by him and hold a grudge, like it could be the case with Harding. But maybe her disapproval is not a result of her morals or her opinion of Solus, but rather of her arcane knowledge. Even though she's not an Altus or a Magister, Neve is a mage of Tevinter and, as such, she must have extensive magical knowledge. She was already able to track Solus by identifying hints of old magic, and later, when Rook suggests disrupting the ritual, she objects by saying,
"Interrupting a ritual of this scale will have consequences."
And of course, later we see that she was absolutely right. In retrospect, Neve being against Rook's intervention portrays her as someone with vast magical knowledge and understanding of arcane forces. So when Varric wanted to talk to Solus, maybe Neve was in favor of it because she knew the ritual could only be stopped willingly by Solus himself and not in any other way. Still, despite her initial protests, she and Harding both volunteer to help Rook bring down the statues, and it's up to Rook to choose who will accompany them and who will stay behind and deal with the demons. The game states the chosen companion will be affected in some way, but we don't know how exactly. When Rook first suggests taking down the statue, Neve points out that
stepping into all that raw magic is suicide.
And even though neither Rook nor the chosen companion dies in this scene, we know they will suffer consequences. Harding is said to develop magical abilities in the game, possibly as a result of the events at the ritual site, but Neve's already a mage. Maybe she will gain access to a magical ability she didn't have before. Maybe she becomes a healer, as we know healing spells will be back and Neve notes in the Streets of Minrathous story that she's not a healer. Or maybe she will get injured like Harding seems to be in this image. After the disastrous events at the ritual site, Neve is with Rook and Harding at the lighthouse, Solus's hideout that the three now occupy. Here Rook can flirt with Neve before proceeding with the rest of the main story. The team decides to try to return to the ritual site, and the journey makes them cross paths with whale jumpers and the next companion, Bellara. There's no information about what happens after this point, so we will just have to wait and see. I, for one, am very curious about Neve and can't wait to learn more about her and her background and see her story unfold. As interested as I am in her story as a whole, there are two specific things I am wondering about at this point. One, how does she know Varric? And two, how did she come to have a dwarven prosthetic as a part of her leg? And the more I think about it, the more I believe the two answers could be connected. When we first see Neve and Varric in The Missing, it's obvious that isn't their first meeting, but we're given no background to their relationship. So how do they know each other? Who introduced them? Varric is certainly well connected, as is Neve. I mean, she has to be in her line of work, and it's quite possible they've been introduced through a mutual friend. Varric has a few friends in Tevinter, and I think the friend most likely to know Neve and be the link between the two is Magister Mevari Stilani. Nope, not Dorian, May, and here's why. May is a well-known enemy of the Venatori. While Dorian was helping the Inquisition against Corypheus, May was sitting in the Imperial Senate, and it was May who proposed the law to restrict Venatori activity in Tevinter. The motion didn't gain wide support, but it did help draw like-minded individuals to May's cause, as well as make May the target of Venatori cultists. It is not difficult to imagine that in times such as these, May would need some help to identify who her enemies were, maybe the help of a private investigator. The fact that Neve's prosthetic leg is of dwarven make also makes me think of May. As of now, we don't know the reason for Neve missing the leg below her knee. Was she born that way? Is it a result of an injury? And if so, was it something recent? We don't know. But for the sake of the argument, let's assume Neve lost her leg at some point during her adult life. May is the widow of Varric's cousin, Thorold Tetras, and keeps close ties with the Dwarven Ambassadoria. If a private detective living in Minrathous had a prosthetic leg made for her by one of the dwarves living in Tevinter, May had ways to learn of it and maybe hire that detective. And if Neve lost a part of her leg after meeting May, it would have been easy for May to arrange for the prosthetic to be made by one of her dwarven contacts. I know I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but hey, I did promise you speculations in the title of this video. But May being the one who introduced Neve to Varric is not the only possibility, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts and theories, so please feel free to share them in the comments. So we went through Neve's story in Tevinter Nights, her appearance in the comic The Missing, and a piece of the game shown in the gameplay video. There's only one thing left to look into that could offer us some more insight into who Neve is and what we could expect from her story going forward, and that is her tarot card. Yes, Inquisition-style tarot cards are back, and we can already see all the companion tarot cards. And here's Neve's. Most of the things we see here emphasize what we already know. We see Neve wearing her distinctive headpiece, her fascinator, and holding her unique weapon. She's surrounded by icy winds, reinforcing the fact she's an ice mage. Minrathous is in the background, which is again expected given that is where she lives. But the most curious thing about Neve's tarot card is this shadow here. The shadow is holding a staff, and a spiky staff at that, the upper part resembling a creature with scales, like a serpent or a dragon. Both animals are commonly associated with Tevinter, so it's easy to assume the person casting that shadow is a mage from Tevinter. It could be that a shadowy figure is one of Neve's enemies, someone waiting in the shadows for the right moment to strike. If it is one of Neve's enemies, then it is probably a Venatori, as her work in the story The Streets of Minrathous and her involvement with the Shadow Dragons earned her the ire of the cultists. But that isn't the only possible explanation. Yes, it could be a Venatori or some Tevinter mage, but with that spiky head and broad shoulder pads, it also resembles an arcane horror. If it is the danger of an arcane horror looming over Neve, it could be the type of enemy that will be relevant to her personal story, or, worst case scenario, it could be a hint at Neve's fate. Game director Corinne Bush did say we might lose some characters in this game, and that might mean the companions as well. An arcane horror is a specific type of abomination created when a pride demon possesses the corpse of a mage. So if Neve were to die and then a pride demon were to possess her body, she would qualify as an arcane horror, which would be a gruesome fate for her and one I wouldn't wish on her, but the existence of this shadow certainly seems ominous. The shadow could also be a hint of Neve's secret identity. If the shadow is a mage from Tevinter, well, that fits Neve as well. And her secret identity doesn't have to be anything nefarious. She could be, for example, high-ranking member of the Shadow Dragons. Although I have to admit, Neve is a Shadow Dragon wouldn't be much of a revelation, and if that is her secret identity, well, it's not particularly well hidden. But at least the shadow wouldn't be pointing to something sinister in that case. And there it is, everything we know about Neve, from her appearances in the various media, and some theories and speculations because I couldn't help myself and had to include them. But what do you think of Neve? Do you like the way she's been portrayed so far? What do you expect from her character going forward? Tell me all your thoughts and theories in the comments. I look forward to reading them, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Goodbye!